So we're digitising smell and taste. Animals, humans, we're able to collect real-time chemical information about the world around us through smell and taste. And we want, your phone, your computer, LLMs to be able to smell the world.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain, and privileged to have Jonathan Good, the co-founder and chief executive of Scentian Bio, joining us again. How are you, Jonathan?
I'm great, thanks. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, look, thanks for setting aside some time to come back in. Maybe you can remind listeners, where you fit into this big wide world of tech before we jump into the news, and then we'll come back for a deep dive into what's happening in the Scentian Bio world.
So yes, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Scentian Bio. We're a deep tech startup here in Auckland, and we're digitising smell and taste. So we're giving machines a sense of smell.
This is so cool. I'm really looking forward to delving in more into that, Jonathan. So yeah, great to have you back. Thank you again to our amazing show partners, Spark, One New Zealand, 2 Degrees, Workday, Fortinet and Gorilla Technology. We just, love their support of the industry as a whole and for keeping New Zealand Tech Podcast on the air. Well, let's jump into the New Zealand news. First up, Health New Zealand's moving to hybrid cloud infrastructure, and it's come out just in the last day or so. There's been a little bit that they published previously, but in New Zealand, we have the GETS platform where the government entities will put out what they're looking to acquire, and they're wanting people to pitch for that business. And so what they've said on that platform is that they're looking at multiple suppliers to help them migrate and modernize their legacy systems. And they're talking about 12,000 servers, which is, this has got to be one of the biggest projects of its kind in the country, and of being able to sort of migrate that older infrastructure into a more modern world, whether that's with local hosting providers or into the hyperscale kind of cloud world. And yeah, I think it's exciting to see an entity that has probably, I guess, historically had some significant challenges from a technology perspective, that they've got this roadmap, that they've got government funding to invest in lifting their game, modernising, consolidating. And look, this is not going to be any sort of easy project, is it? Because as they've got thousands of different applications across the country, and there's definitely a journey ahead for them. But the fact they're getting out and getting underway to make this move forward, I think is pretty encouraging. What are your thoughts, Jonathan?
It's great to see the investment in the digital side of health. We tend to think about health as hospitals and doctors and nurses, but it's just as important these days to have the information accessible and protected, and that's really hard. It's easy just to say 12,000 servers, but I think about where those are and the legacy that's implicit in them. This is going to be a pretty hard project, but a necessary one, I think, for all of us and our well-being.
Yeah. And look, you've made an important point, around data protection and so on. And look, we've seen challenges in that area in the past, and this becomes part of that journey forwards, is modernising and securing as we go. So very hopeful for some good outcomes there, and lots of opportunities for multiple, probably quite a good number of organisations from the technology sector to participate in that in a range of ways. So I think just pleasing that this is being funded, and they're getting on and going to get on and do it.
Yeah, and hopefully sets a bit of a foundation for our next wave of health innovation as well.
Mm-hmm. Just on the sort of the health innovation side, we've spoken to founders and co-founders of Tend, who provide general practitioner, doctors, clinics, and online healthcare in New Zealand. One of our innovative startups here who just happen to have a branch virtually next door to our office. But it was announced in recent days that they're anticipating to acquire a chain currently owned by, the chain is called The Doctors. So it's a big chain of GP clinics in New Zealand, and it's owned by
Is it Green Cross?
Green Cross, that's what I was looking for. It was like a missing word. So I think, because of the scale of it, there may need to be some, regulatory hoops to jump through. That caught my attention as well. They're really scaling, and through these acquisitions, and I think the outcome of that, if it keeps heading in the directions that we understand they're going, in a way that could be quite transformative to how healthcare is delivered to many of us around the country.
Yeah, I think it's they're sort of nice bookends in a way. You've got the front end innovation where patients are interacting at their GP clinics, and then this, the hard yards in the background of, the secure cloud migration of servers and applications that are providing the sort of, critical hard services in hospitals around the country.
Yeah.
And it's kind of nice in a way that there's investment going on at both ends.
It is, and I think it'd be interesting, and we probably should do sort of look at a way we can sort of survey listeners a little bit for some of their experiences in different areas, because I know, for myself, when I look at, say, dealing with a general practitioner, that the technology mechanisms sort of surrounding that primary care has not been very good in New Zealand, shall we say, in the past. It definitely interests me, and I happen to be in the camp that is sits under the doctors, one of their customers or patients, and so I'm very curious what the uplift could be there. Now, Spark are tackling impersonation scams with a verified call feature to help people understand the difference between a genuine call from them as a telco, as a technology provider, and the scam calls. And they're one of those organisations who in the past have had people impersonating them and calling up and saying, hey, calling about your Spark account and so on. And of course these things have happened across multiple areas. Telco, banking. A couple of nights ago, I received one on the immigration front. Now, they had the wrong person because I was born in New Zealand, but of course they do these things en masse, and the message was that there was an issue with my visa. And I can imagine if you're someone who's new to the country, you don't have citizenship, and you're getting a kind of an urgent robot call. There is a chance, depending on when it hits you, that you might respond to that and think that it's actually legitimate. So this capability that they're launching, I think could have broader implications than just when it comes to sort of differentiating legitimate calls from say your telco. Now, I've had a go at trying this out, and I haven't quite got there yet. So my experience, or what I can share, is to turn on this verified call functionality, you have to have the Spark app installed, and you've got to go in and tick a couple of boxes. One of those boxes gives the app access to the contacts on your phone, because what they do is when you're receiving this call, and I'm looking at it through the iPhone lens because that's where I've been testing it so far. I haven't tried on Android yet. Possibly that would have worked for me, but on the iPhone, what it does is it pings through electronically. When Spark are calling you, they ping the app on your phone, and then update. This is my understanding. I haven't had this fully verified, but this is what it looks like. They update the contact card for Spark, matches the number, and maybe it changes it back again after the call, but it changes it to say, hey, this is a verified call. And it includes on that screen that comes up what they're calling about as well. So that versus just a unknown number or just saying Spark because they're in your contacts. sounds to me like a really good approach. And if they could roll that out across the board, then brilliant. But to make it work, you do need to turn on access to your contacts. Now, for me, sort of cybersecurity, data privacy, zero trust, I didn't want to do that, but in iOS you can allow access to specific contacts, which is what I did, and possibly that's not the right way to do it. Also, I can understand there will be, your average user who's not deep into their technology. They may be uncomfortable giving access to their contacts, but not want to, muck around with
Still expect the result.
with the results. So that might be that there's some iteration that Spark can do on this front to achieve the right outcome. But it does seem, to me like, hey, this is another positive in terms of removing or reducing a particular attack vector.
Yeah, I mean, scams are certainly a huge challenge. So it's nice to see people working on trying to reduce the risk there. I guess I'm millennial enough. I don't like answering the phone.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because I was interviewed this morning on Harold's show, and I got exactly the same kind of from the interviewer I was like, this is another person that actually doesn't really answer the phone. So, to them, they're like, how's this relevant? There wasn't quite that extreme, but there is that aspect, right, where we've got kind of different patterns now in terms of where phone actually fits into our worlds.
Yeah, and the trouble, I guess, is that's, the scammers are following us everywhere. I mean, I had a pretty good WhatsApp attempted scam come through for my recent hotel booking, actually, and it was interesting. Like, they'd obviously passed together a whole bunch of interesting information about me to make something urgent and compelling, and I guess it's the dangerous environment. So that sort of macro message of just being suspicious, I guess, is the number one thing we need to
was this
people.
The Booking.com
Yep.
situation? So it does seem, we haven't covered in detail, but it does seem as though Booking.com, either the platform or the software that individual hotels are running, somewhere in that mix there has been data that's been compromised.
Yeah, definitely.
And I had exactly the same discussion with somebody over the weekend who had seen enough oddities going on in their device. Their partner was messaging me saying, "Oh, can you give us a little bit of advice, Paul, on this situation? There's a concern that my partner's device has been compromised." And it was really interesting for me to kind of, just hear this from, I guess a non-technologist, everyday person that had seen so many different oddities going on within their, just within their phone, that they were panicked that they've been, actually hit. And, I was able to go through the whole list kind of, one by one. Oh, you're seeing this because Apple's changed something. Oh, you're seeing this because of, X, Y, Z. And probably the one where there was actually a real issue would be their booking with bookings.com. And it was a genuine issue, but it wasn't because their direct device had been compromised, would be my take. But boy, the world's getting complicated, isn't it?
It sure is.
Yeah. So good on Spark for what they're doing here. I think across the telco landscape, we're seeing considerable work that's gone into blocking scam texts and calls. Varying
some of the
things
stats
that
from
they're
Spark
doing
on that, the numbers were
Oh,
off the charts.
huge numbers. Yeah.
There was, I think, millions of calls they'd blocked over the course of the past year.
Yeah, if you stack it all up. And then we've seen Samsung who are looking for numbers that have been kind of reported as kind of scam type numbers. So that goes in. So, we really are seeing some industry-wide efforts to reduce that. And I think the impact is dramatically reduced on what it could be, but there are still issues as we've both experienced in different ways. So, yeah. Now, Workday have expanded out their AI-powered Workday Go platform into Australia and New Zealand. So just thought I'd mention that. I know, we've had them on the show and they're a show partner. But sometimes what happens, with platforms is the bleeding edge of innovation happens somewhere else in the world, and especially when it comes to areas like payroll and and finance, and it doesn't necessarily, get so quickly to New Zealand. I mean, I think for zero customers, New Zealand sort of sits in a pretty good place because it's still a lot of development and focus from New Zealand. But yeah, I thought that was just encouraging to see, Workday aren't leaving us behind down here. And the other topic on the local front is 2 Degrees have put out their Shaping Business Study 2026 report. We'll have a link to it in the show notes. I was at the event this morning, but it happened to be down at NZME where they run their annual event and they have a sort of panel discussion to delve into the highlights. I would recommend folks go and have a look at that if you are interested in the broader picture of what's happening and what the sentiment is out there from a business perspective. I think fair to say, when you look at the report, that the optimism which it had kind of looked like it had turned upward last year. That's the data's not kind of showing quite the same this year, unfortunately. However, the sentiment does seem to be stronger for, I guess, newer organisations rather than the older ones, and there was a strong focus still on investment in AI and technology for business. So I think that's encouraging that people understand that, hey, that's an important way forward. Regardless of what's happening, leveraging tech, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think the sort of overall, I saw international volatility turned up for the first time as a sort of key concern, and obviously
Yes.
the context has shifted quite a lot. And it's kind of nice to see that people are realizing that technology can play a role in that rewiring and how we respond. And it's not a case of sitting still and waiting for the world to be different. It's about sort of taking the opportunities that exist in the world we're living in.
Yeah. And there were a couple of interesting comments that came through. Mark Callender, who's the chief executive at 2 Degree, he commented on one particular way that he's using agentic AI, and he said he's created agentic AI versions of all of his board members, which I think got a few laughs across the room. People are like, "You what?" And he explained it like this: when he's got to prepare for a board meeting, if he actually can put those board papers in front of, I guess, an AI that kind of understands the different, perspectives of his board, then, he can actually be nudged to think about the sort of questions that they're likely, to ask when they get into their meetings. And that, allows him to maybe be more prepared for the meeting, which I think, hey, that sounds like a good use case, right?
It is. It's quite clever. I like it.
Yeah. And there was another comment also in regards to this. This was the chief executive of Warren and Mahoney in New Zealand, John Coop. And when he was asked around, well, where does agentic AI fit into your business? So at one end you had 2 Degrees sort of saying, hey, we're experimenting with a whole lot and we've got a range of AI tools. John's comment was that they're really expecting their software vendors to build agentic AI into their platforms, and so I don't think that's a head in the sand approach. It's a smart approach too, and I think each organisation, depending on where they sit, have to have some sort of a plan when it comes to how we're going to leverage this technology in positive and appropriate ways. And I don't think that means that they've shut everything out in terms of their AI usage, but it is very much the big lifts for them will come from the software that's specific to them. I guess as a leading architectural firm, they're relying on some pretty grunty software that helps them with building their plans and so on. And I think there probably will be some significant uplifts in that area over the years ahead. So
Yeah, it seems like it could be a really smart strategy. I think you don't have to look for innovation by doing it yourself. You can absolutely look for it from your vendors, and in something like architecture, where presumably the ability to edit and adjust some of the concepts and evolve those designs. Those probably building pretty well on some of the sort of leading, global frontier labs models. And yeah, that's not necessarily the innovation you want to be doing yourself on your team, but you want to be as much as possible running with the latest tools. And so maybe the obligation there is just to try and find vendors and make sure that your existing vendors are embracing the technologies to add the functionality.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know, within the fields that I work, we've definitely sort of seen a mix of things where it's let's come up with something sort of bespoke for a particular purpose. But in a lot of cases, there might be completely new off-the-shelf tools that sort of fit into the mix, or they might be existing vendors who are building in those new capabilities. The last one I'll mention is Nicola Taylor, co-founder of Tax Traders and Taxi. So they've got some interesting and very successful businesses there, and they build a lot of technology themselves to create their own innovations. And her comment was that they're now at a point where something like 80% of the code that they cut is agentically created, AI created for them, so that they've gone through what sounds like a really interesting journey in their case, from the days where they just wanted to get in and get their feet wet and try these things out, and they're probably less productive than what they had been previously, but now a point where they're seeing really, really significant performance improvements in terms of, hey, they want some new capabilities. They're able to deliver that stuff, at a pace that they weren't able to do so before. Also, I like, hearing that they've not reduced their, they haven't let anyone go on their software development front. It's actually just that they can now move a lot faster than what they were, doing previously. So, yeah, I think it's important to to get these touch points and insights. I don't know what you're finding and whether you're building a lot of software yourselves, but does that sort of line up with things that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, we're in the sort of newer company, growing mindset, and so that's a slightly different paradigm, I guess, than the sort of large established firms that are also canvassed in this, who are, reworking what they're doing. The good part about, building up from the start is that you don't have the legacy and the challenges of transition. I mean, we have one amazing software developer on our team, but it's kind of incredible to me. I mean, I had my my first startup in social media, and I mean, we had a really sizable software team, and what we can do now with one person is amazing. But yeah, I guess we're in the business of building our business and growing our team, and so we can just do that with these incredible tools, sort of baked in, augmenting us, which I think helps with the adoption and helps with the impact.
Yeah. Oh, that's exciting. Now, a couple of things to touch on I guess more global topics. We've seen a bit of from varying directions. There's things from inside Uber. It's probably the one that sort of caught the most attention, but I guess the heading is AI now more expensive than using humans? And so we've heard a few of these stories. In the case of Uber, I think they budgeted it was something like over $3 billion dollars, so that their software development team could really utilize AI for coding, and to give them this big uplift. And then they burnt through that entire budget in a few months, right? And so we've started in recent months sort of hearing these stories that actually, no, it'd be cheaper actually to get a human to do that than to get the AI to do it. And look, I think it probably is important to recognize that as with any technology, you can't just sort of throw AI in and expect it to solve all your problems and always be the best in every situation. And I think when we go down that track, we potentially create all sorts of risks. And I think you have to go in, experiment, and learn, and work out where is artificial intelligence going to give an uplift, without bringing in and level of risk or problems, be that risk of kind of dehumanizing a customer experience, or be it a risk of actually, that you're spending more than doing it conventionally, which in some cases may make sense from a pace perspective, right? If it allows your startup to move 4 times as fast, but it's going to cost, a bit more than using people in a particular area, then you may say yes to that.
I mean, I do think your comment's exactly right. It's about what are you trying to achieve here? And the Uber comments were kind of interesting to me because it sounded like, we've got 5,000 developers. We've let everyone use, AI as much as they want. And then we're sort of surprised that we spent lots of money on tokens. It was kind of missing like what they were trying, like what was the thing they were trying to do and what was the budget for? And had they achieved all the budgeted outcomes, in a few months, and actually this was a great investment and they wanted to do more of it.
Yeah, everyone can take the rest of the year off. You've achieved your goals.
Or they're expanding in new markets.
But it sounds like there's some missing pieces there, maybe in terms of clarity and discipline. And this is without delving deep into the story. But
and this is before you think about the economics of the frontier labs providing these models, right? Where they're I mean, I think about how great it is that we're getting these access to these models that, Anthropic and co are spending a lot of money on.
Yeah.
And they're not breaking even on them at the moment.
And then the other element on AI is United Nations University report that indicates, that some significant real world environmental, costs of AI, looking at things like the, energy hungry, data centers, the impact of, training models and ongoing sort of daily use is this, is, having a material impact from a perspective of, carbon emissions and sort of impact on water and land use. So just I think important to be looking at the whole picture when it comes to these things. I think it's easy for me anyway as a technologist and futurist to always get sort of super excited around we get this uplift, but we also need to sort of spin things around and always be looking at, well, what's the flip side? If there are great positives, there's usually something to sort of temper that with that we do need to consider. So I think it's important that whole picture's looked at.
Yeah, I think there's also some pretty amazing innovation around that. I mean, just as a local example, ABB's local Hawke's Bay office have been at the forefront of designing new UPSs for data centers, doing absolutely amazing things, changing their power consumption. I mean, there are, I guess, technology can provide some of these answers, and some of the AI models are themselves actually reducing some of the energy footprint. And so, so I think it's not a static picture, but, building in places that have more renewables and leveraging those is an advantage, and we should feel pretty good about, what we've got in terms of our energy endowment here in New Zealand.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, keen to delve in now to the Scentian Bio story. Of course, we've had you on the show before, but not everyone will have caught that. So maybe you can just, give us a breakdown of what Scentian Bio is all about.
So we're digitising smell and taste, and we want, your phone, your computer, LLMs to be able to smell the world. And animals, humans, were able to collect real-time chemical information about the world around us through smell and taste. But at the moment, that's inaccessible in a digital realm. And we're making little chips that produce real-time chemical information. And that's initially for the food industry. That's where we're starting out.
Yep. So, and what you just held up is a little gadget that, to me, it looks like a kind of a solid-state drive or something.
It does look a bit like a USB stick.
Or there's an element there where you're able to.
The sensor zone is actually just
explain how
this
it
tiny
works.
little bit embedded in the plastic that's about the size of my fingernail.
Right.
And this is a liquid sensor, this version.
Yeah.
And so the idea is this comes to our first use case. So we're working with some of the world's largest food and beverage companies, and they want to check the quality of their ingredients.
Right. So this is one of those problems that you can solve, is to make that Because how does that compare with using Scentian Bio's technology and what they would have been doing previously?
Yes, at the moment, people want more natural ingredients, so the food supply chain is oriented around, trying to consume more, milk, horticultural products. All of these are great inputs into the food supply chain. But what happens in reality is they turn up at a food manufacturer, they take a sample and they send it away to a lab, and it runs on a big giant mass spec machine in a lab, and it takes at least an hour and a half to actually run the sample. But the logistics of getting it to and from means generally the results come back the next day. And the consequence of that with perishable food is by then you've already made something. And so that's why as consumers we observe in the food industry recalls, and there's a lot of food waste from write-offs, and there's a lot of rework in terms of manufacturing. So those are all the things that exist today as a consequence of the sort of slow information flows from these big analog machines. And what we're doing is we're making these small chips. They can be used anywhere. So at the truck dock where a load's coming through, you can literally take a sample of a new batch and check then and there the quality of that sample. And so before you run production, you're confident about what you're using, and you can put food to its best possible use.
And can you share with us, what specific sort of product areas that you're seeing sort of the most interest, being in New Zealand?
Yep.
And you already mentioned milk. Is that an area, or is it more manufactured sort of products that need to go through this type of check?
Yes, we have pilots underway with 7 leading global food and beverage companies. So a couple here in New Zealand and then predominantly in the US. And there we're working on more specialized food ingredients. So that, we're starting out with sort of high value food products that are then used in a lot of other products. And so the flow through impact of those being off spec or having taints or contaminants is really, really damaging. And so we're spotting particular known contaminants in those samples. That's the current pilots.
Yeah. And so you would see that over time, this will help those businesses to not have so much sort of waste and to catch issues sort of sooner. So this ultimately has kind of flow on in multiple directions to safety for for consumers in terms of the products they consume, but also, obviously some good, financial benefits of catching these things early as well.
Yeah, and it's, this is a product for everyone. So in the food context, we're starting out with some of the largest firms who we can, build our expertise with. But ultimately, our chips are inexpensive. They don't require any CapEx. There's no big machine, there's no lab. And so this is something that, in that spirit, every food manufacturer could be using. And so it can be ubiquitous. Yeah, and then there's the other platform opportunities where we see chemical information being useful. But this, we're starting out in this $8 billion food quality market.
Fantastic. And you've secured $7 million in pre-Series A, in a pre-Series A, funding round. I'm curious to hear a little bit about that journey, and what was that like to to go through, and any tips for listeners that maybe on their own journeys with their own startups, or even feedback for those on the VC sort of side from your experience.
Yeah, so we've closed a $7 million pre-Series A round. It was led by Icehouse Ventures, and with strong support from Cultivate Ventures, DYDX, Toyota, K1W1, Booster, and fundraising is one of those things as an entrepreneur it's always demanding. You're out there telling people about what you're making, and they're asking hard questions and attempting to sort of cross-check, and so I think what was it like? There's a lot of conversations, and I think for me, a strange part of me really likes fundraising, because you talk to a whole bunch of incredibly smart people, and they ask really good questions, and in doing that, you learn more about what you need to be conscious of, what are the risks that you should be managing, what are the opportunities that you weren't considering. And yeah, I think for us, that fundraising journey, over the course of, 6 months, I talked to, a huge number of people, and felt like we've really sort of strengthened and learnt about what we're trying to do, what the path for that looks like, and then ultimately, had fantastic support from folks to do that.
And in terms of, part of it obviously is talking and sort of sharing the story, the potential that you see in it. But I'm presuming there's also a fair element of sort of behind the scenes due diligence in terms of numbers and data and so on. How challenging is the sort of the to and fro on those sorts of things to kind of land on the numbers and get people across the line, because I think a quick chat with you, it's pretty easy to be convinced, like, wow, this is a really exciting area to be involved in. But ultimately, at some point, you have to land on a valuation and how much money that you're raising at a given point. How do those pieces look?
Yeah, I think there's a sort of a few bits in there. I mean, on the sort of financial forecasting and the sort of due diligence. Yeah, I think those are always things that are the hard, and you do them at a moment in time, and then as the sort of fundraising and the round progresses, there's this need to sort of rework and revise those literally, you just live through time, and in a startup that's very material.
Yeah.
But I think it also relates back to this point I was making about feedback, because smart people who've seen a lot of other startups provide useful input, and you realize, we should be planning to invest more in that, or maybe our growth assumptions are slightly wrong here. And I guess I'm really attuned to trying to make it more of a dynamic process. I think one of the things that in my mind entrepreneurs can do wrong is that they can try and make it this sort of moment in time investment memorandum or something, and it's like, here it is, and like it or not. Whereas to me, it's more of a joint endeavor with the folks that I can enlist to believe in what we're doing. And then ultimately at the end, there's the sort of valuation discussion, which is always the darkest art of all. But sort of somehow comes out, I think, from the sort of set of discussions. Then ultimately, when someone issues a term sheet, that sort of starts to set the tenor for where that can be landed.
And compare that with maybe your experience in the US, having founded in the US, gone through Y Combinator, and doing this in New Zealand. I mean, there's a reasonable difference between fundraising in Silicon Valley versus in Auckland.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, first off, things take a little bit longer from here. I mean, in the Bay Area, obviously, you can very, very quickly connect with a large number of of folks with very deep pockets, whether that's angels or VCs. And, those folks are very interested here as well. And so, we have significant US presence in our round, but that, I think there's just a slightly different expectation of the level of relationship, and that takes a little bit longer. Yeah, I think it's also, the world's changed a fair bit as well, and at the moment there's obviously the sort of AI hype cycle that sort of sets the context for our fundraising as well. And I think that also just creates an environment where we're using AI and we're building for AI, but we're a little bit less traditional than the typical AI, and I think that also just makes the cycle time a little bit longer. But ultimately, I think whether it's here or the US, there are a lot of VCs and angel investors who are looking for what the next most exciting opportunity is. And in the sort of bio AI space that we're in, there's a lot of emergent opportunities. So we're kind of excited to be part of that.
Yeah. Looking recently a little bit about for those that are maybe feeling like I'm kind of in the category that maybe I consider some angel investing. Any tips that that you can share from your side for those that are maybe interested in getting their feet wet from that perspective?
I mean, angel investing is a hard craft to learn. So, but it can be an incredibly fun one too. I mean, I've personally made some angel investments, and think about that as it's not in a pure financial approach, I would say. And I think that's an important part of the domain because it's at a very, very early stage, it's very hard to build a broad enough portfolio, I guess, to be able to generate the expected outcome. And so you have to expect you're going to have some other subset of the distribution. But I mean, I think, being engaged and being part of building a business is incredibly exciting. And I think for folks who have the means and the energy, it's not just about the capital that they might be able to contribute, but I mean, we've been, really lucky in our progress to this point to have, some fantastic early investors who've been able to make the connections and provide the introductions that have laid the groundwork for what we're doing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, I think it's certainly a pretty important part of the picture, and and I guess that would vary, in New Zealand in terms of how it would fit together versus say in the Valley a little bit too. There, different types of networks and so on. Okay, that's great. Always curious around the hard stuff. What would you say has been the biggest challenge that you've had to deal with to date?
At the end, we're taking incredibly innovative technology, and we are turning that into a product that is used to manage risk. And so, the sort of commercialization focus on reliability and performance is, I think that's the hardest challenge of what we're doing. Making sure that when we've shipped one of our chips, that we're incredibly confident that it's going to deliver to the customer's expectation. But that's the exciting stuff too, right? That takes it from being this sort of interesting possibility into real world impact. And the cool part, I think, is as a team, I think we're feeling really positive from seeing this journey that we're on towards a product that customers are using and making decisions on. And, some of our pilot customers are talking about like the implications that it has for them. And it's super material, which is in the scale of the companies that we're working with is really cool.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, that's great. It's been exciting to delve in a little bit more to what's happening in the Scentian Bio world, Jonathan. If anyone's wanting to get in touch, what's the best way to do that?
Either ping me on LinkedIn or email me, jonathan@scentianbio.com. Definitely, always open to ideas, comments, whatever folks think would be interesting, and looking for what. And I mean, it's maybe worth just mentioning. I think we are ultimately a platform opportunity, and we talked quite a lot about the food part, but we are in some early collaborations in some other areas about where chemical sensing can be useful. And if folks are listening to this thinking, in my industry, this could be really interesting, I'd definitely be interested in talking further about that.
Yeah, fantastic. Good stuff. Well, thanks for coming on New Zealand Tech Podcast again. And of course, a big thank you to our show partners, to Fortinet, Workday, One New Zealand, 2 Degrees Spark, and Gorilla Technology. If you've been watching the video, do make sure you're subscribing or following on your favorite audio platform. We these days are across probably most of the places you could look, from YouTube Music and Spotify through to Apple Podcasts and smaller platforms. Of course, if you're listening to the audio, make sure you do follow us on the likes of YouTube as well, because we do have that sort of mix of audio and video content. Well, thanks everyone for listening in, and we'll catch you again on the next episode. And thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks so much.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.